European super freeze is what we're going to start to see more and more of. It happened at the very edge of winter going into spring. What happens when that same thing happens again when everything is in full bloom?
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time: cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, wherever you are on this planet. We can share ideas, solutions, thoughts moving forward. My name is David DuByne, creator of Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age 2015 to 2035 channel on YouTube, my website, oilseedcrops.org, where I've been working on this for the last few days, putting up the resources for the grand solar minimum. So you have a repository of information feeds, maps, temperatures, news aggregators, and everything in one location so you can have everything at your fingertips. And as I started my channel a couple of years ago, I really got into cryptocurrency because of what smart contracts can offer for grain deliveries as we move into the crop losses. And when these economies start to shrink, stagnate, local banking has some difficulties with letters of credit. This is what really drew me into the whole usage of crypto. And in my forecast at that time with the grand solar minimum intensification, I had talked about the movement of the weather changes and crypto as a DNA strand moving. And I was stating that as we get closer to the crop losses, the more regulation will be put in place to bring in larger institutional investors, and there'll need to be a sort of a foundation set with regulation before the big money comes in. And I was saying, use that as a benchmark to determine how quickly everything is changing and how close we are getting to the food crop losses. Authorities taking steps now to actually put laws in place so then larger money can come in, because this is going to be what needs to take place for us to move over to a new system. Countries are getting on board now using this, offering their own crypto sovereign tokens. I mean, it's coming to a level that has been forecast. I want to wrap this into sort of a package today so you understand why crypto is being used, pushed, and it is going to be the new money system. And I know so many of you are against it. I know so many of you are for it. You're excited about it. You see it as a new way for technology, usage of transfer of money, wealth. A lot of people talk about, what if there's a solar flare? What's going to happen with the electricity grid? Are we still going to have a blockchain after such a large event like a Carrington type event? And speaking of forecasts, I really wanted to cover what's going on with the grand solar minimum. It is becoming very evident that we are into the next step of amplification into the food crop losses globally. The amplification that's happened over these European super freeze is what we're going to start to see more and more of. It happened at the very edge of winter going into spring. What happens when that same thing happens again when everything is in full bloom and shoots are above the ground, plants are coming up into several inches, several centimeters high, and we get another one of those super freezes that comes down? This is exactly what the grand solar minimum effect is with the fingerprint. And you look through history and you see it again and again. Now, the most famous of the grand solar minimums obviously is the Maunder minimum. But we also do have other minimums that aren't talked about too widely. The Sporer minimum. Abrupt Earth Changes with Sasha Dobler covers this the best of anybody that I've seen. He's done, free ebooks, free PDFs. And again, that website is Abrupt Earth Changes. He covers what happened during the spore minimum. Now, this is in the 1400s, late 1300s, 1400s. Our records are sketchy at best, even going back then, because through history, there's just been so much lost through wars. The Vatican has confiscated so much stuff and put it in their private libraries. And not to point the finger just at the Vatican per se, but museums routinely have just so much stock, if you will, of history, but they just all keep it out of eyes of you, the individual, going to be able to see what's there. We really don't even know how much is left from these prior time periods because it's in private collections. It's been stocked away and put in basements of museums. And the most infamous of these would be the Vatican Library. Even with somebody through glass, you're not even allowed to view what's down there. They can't even bring it to you to take a look through glass. That's how much information is being hidden out of view. And then we go a further step back into the 1100s or so with the onward minimum. How widely is information disseminated from around the 1100s? Think about that. Go back to the 1100s and really just pick your brain right now. How much information written survives from that time period? We certainly have tapestries, etc. But then let's go even a further step back. Well, now they don't even have names any longer. They just date it. We'll go back to 79 AD. How much is surviving written record from the Vesuvius eruption era? That's the most famous time marker for that time, 79 AD. We really don't have much to go on. There's some climatic records at the time, but the best kept seem to be in Arabic language and also in Chinese language. The traders were at the top of their game at that time. We got the Silk Road as well. The Arab traders were all over the place. Phoenicians even further back. But it really gets very murky back when we go back in time. So the best we can look at it for the matchups and the records and what we're starting to see again with these same exact types of freeze outs that were destroying crops. Pretty good. We're going to have to start around with Sasha's information, spore minimum going forward. But you start to see the same thing again and again. They keep talking about routinely giant-sized hail, mix-up in weather streams, out-of-season storms, and routinely the thing that was killing their crops was exactly what we saw in Europe, but later. So imagine if that same setup comes where the intrusion goes into the jet stream, or up into the Arctic Circle, we get the blocking pattern, and it forces that cold air down over the northern hemisphere again into these same exact areas. But a month and a half later, this is what they experience. So if we're already starting to see the same exact blocking patterns, this is kind of a scary thing to wake up to. Now it just needs to push out further in the season, and we get exact matchups with what happened in the 1800s, 1600s, 1300s, 1100s, and 800 AD. That should terrify you right there. You should definitely be taking looks and steps right now, looking at ways that you need to start growing your own food, at least practicing. So as I've said, look for the matchup, and another indicator beyond what would be temperatures or different kind of proxies. You can use pollen count, tree rings, carbon 14, oxygen 18. There's a lot of different proxies, stalactites from caves. There's so many that we can use to reconstruct temperature. And you got drift, the raft drift, like, when icebergs break off and they float out to sea, they have, larger pebbles and they have dust in them. And then wherever it drops in the ocean, they do ocean core drilling, and then they can see how much rafting took place and how much glaciation was at a time when it was more glaciation or less. There's a lot of proxies going on with our temperature reconstructions. And it doesn't seem that the mainstream media picks much up on these because the variance in temperature is a natural phenomenon. It's always up 2, down 3, up 4, down 3, up 2, down 2. It's like that. It's natural. But when we come to this exact modern time right now, the proxy for the movement forward to the food shortages is definitely the introduction of cryptocurrency in our world. And as it was explained to me, it's a lifeline for our global economy and trading. Whoever's in charge out there understands what's about to happen with our global banking system in terms of shrinkage due to people spending more on food. Now, the fingerprint of the Grand Solar Minimum is population migration, economic contraction, and crop wipeouts. Let's start off with Australia. Remember, the southern hemisphere is leading the northern hemisphere by one season in terms of the cooling. Now, going back to the historical record, also this has a cycle where the grand solar minimum started in intensification. Sometimes it starts in the northern hemisphere, where the northern hemi will lead the southern hemisphere by one season. And then others, it seems to flip-flop. Every second grand solar minimum, it turns seasons on the hemispheres. So this seasonal lead out, we have to go back to 800 AD to find the southern hemisphere leading. Well, let's go with it. Australia is going to lead. So what you're going to look for is the amplification of the weather in Australia will dictate the amplification of what's going to happen for us. And this would also be true with South Africa and also South America, southern part of Africa, I should say, and what's happening in South America. And we see Brazil already below normal temperatures. I get messages all the time talking about Argentina and Brazil being below normal. Rain in the grain belts, exceptional rains, and there's some losses there from that. This is not making the mainstream media, I assure you. The only reason it's coming across the Australian newswire is because Australian meteorologist David Taylor, he runs the Brisbane Weather and East Coast Weather Facebook pages. And what he does is use climate reconstructions, including sunspot and solar data, to make his predictions. He predicts where the droughts are. He follows historical cycles and the sun to come up with a forecast for the future. And here the BOM is trying to use statistical models from the IPCC that don't even take into account cloud forcing and Southern Ocean circulation currents. They forgot those two major things on our planet that drive climate. I don't know how they forgot that, but anyway, they did. Somebody established is coming out saying that solar cycles drive our climate on our planet. And I am so happy. I want to get this. David, if you're listening, I want you on my radio program. I want to talk to you about how you forecast models using solar activity and what you see moving forward, because this is just the beginning of it. We're in what I consider the second year of amplification. So if it gets this cold and they're breaking all-time record temperatures, the second year into the amplification, when we don't even reach the most climatic, traumatic weather until 2024, I'm really wondering what's going to happen in those next several years following.
And since I have been talking about our need moving forward in this new society that we're entering as our global grain production starts to be reduced in yield, your food prices are going to skyrocket. And I mean skyrocket, not just doubling or tripling, something like 5 or 10 times higher by 2020 at the very least. TrueLeafMarket.com. I really want to talk about growing your own food, which will be a necessity moving forward. They've been around since 1974, heirloom and organic seeds. Since I've started talking about them in my videos, I have a lot of people write and say that they've previously ordered, that they know the owner, having great results, good customer service. They quite enjoyed the seed quality as well. And there's so many ways that we can go about growing different types of vegetables that we're going to need. Microgreens are incredibly nutritious. They're super fast to grow. In less than a week, you can have something that you can eat. And we know the benefits of microgreens. All you have to do is use a search engine and look up vitamin, mineral, nutrient content of microgreens. You'll be shocked. Also, sprouts. We can get those a little bit taller, a little more dense, a little bit larger volume on the vegetation mass coming off of there. So how do you know what kind of sprouts to grow? How about wheatgrass or herbs? What about different types of herbs that we can add to our foods? Now, what I just described to you, there's a full range of starter guides there at TrueLeafMarket.com for you to take a look at. Even if it's just for your own knowledge and you don't purchase something from them, at least get the information so you know how to grow microgreens, you know how to grow sprouts, you understand what some of the herbs are for. And not only that, they have wheatgrass and grain seeds. So when I'm talking about grain growing regions going offline, we just need to look back in history and see where across the planet there was difficulty growing grains when this grand solar minimum intensified and the jet stream started wandering just like they're doing today, due to a decreased magnetosphere that does not hold our jet streams locked in their traditional flows. Grains are one thing, herb seeds are another, cover crops, something different, but whatever you do, organic seeds are going to be a necessity because you can save those seeds and then grow them the next season, which you unequivocally cannot do with GMO. TrueLeafMarket.com. Use the link below and give yourself the gift of organic and heirloom seeds.
A few people I'm talking to also are saying that by 2020, the crop losses will be in the mainstream media daily, and this is going to create a global panic. People are going to pull their money out of their savings accounts. They're going to cash in their retirement accounts, and they're going to use that money to get ready. This in turn will have the knock-on effect of crashing economies left, right, and center, because we know as fractionalized reserves or fractionalized banking, for every dollar that you have in there, they're loaning out multiple dollars on top of that. And every country is a little bit different. But in the United States, it's up to 99 US dollars that are loaned out for every $1 in an account somewhere. You know, some countries aren't that extreme. Some countries are around 18. So every $1 in means they can loan $18 out. So the same is true contracting. When people pull the money out and it's no longer on the books, they have to also reduce that fractional reserve amount of lending back and rein it in to match. This is one thing that's been not widely talked about as the cause of the contraction, or will be contraction, around 2020. As people pull their money out, the banking system will contract because of the fractional reserves that are going on. I'm curious how this is really going to play out, because how long is it before everybody understands what's happening with the food crop losses? What's that 100th monkey effect? When it rolls over and consciously everybody is awake at the time, like, uh-oh, nobody told us about this? What do you mean? They knew this thing was coming for the last 7 or 8 years? You got people on YouTube talking about it. You got meteorologists talking about it. But why didn't it make the mainstream media? And why am I sitting here in line waiting for food now? There's going to be a lot of angry people out there. A lot of angry, scared, misinformed people that are not going to know what to do, except they're just going to take money out and try to buy something to get ready. And think about yourself. Like, if the news came to you and it said, all right, hey, crop losses are here. Everything from now on is going to get more expensive. And there's going to be greater losses next year, which means that there'll be even less choice, less availability on the market, and the prices are going to double again next year. What would you buy to get ready? Now think about that yourself and then take it out. You're going to be competing with others at the same time that are all waking up. So do some analysis on what you think people might buy. Okay, let's start with something super simple, shovels. I understand there's a lot of shovel manufacturers, and shovels can be manufactured quite easily. The normal garden shop or wherever you go to, Home Depot, how many shovels are there? 15? 10? What if everybody buys those out? Great. Well, they're going to have to reorder. It's going to take a minute to get the shovels back in. And what happens if the just-in-time delivery system's not working? Or what happens if the 30-day, 60-day, 90-day letters of credit aren't functioning properly because the banks are having difficulty due to everybody pulling their money out, and LCs aren't being issued anymore? How are we going to do global trade? This is the whole reason that cryptocurrency is being introduced, so we can still buy and sell globally, because it doesn't matter. I'll just lock up some ether in a smart contract, and with the manufacturer and the distributor and the shipping company in the middle somewhere. Funds are all distributed and guaranteed payment, smart contracts. Remember that. Most people are using Solidity at the moment, but there's this new thing coming out called secret contracts, where they're going to use a side chain. So it's like this, the blockchain, when you're doing a transaction, everything's within the chain itself. So sometimes the times are a little slower than they should be. And the execution, the hash rates are using up the availability of the chain itself to operate at a more optimal level. So what they're going to do is they're going to take these where they go off chain, side chain, and they're going to do the transaction on the side chain, not on the main chain. And then they're just going to get the result, either proof of work, and then they're going to put it back in as the transaction being completed, and then they're going to run it that way. It's the simplest way I can explain it. It's almost like you as a baker, if you're going to do a little side lot of, 12 muffins of something different over here, but you're doing a whole run of 500 loaves of bread, but you're going to pull a little bit of dough. You're just going to go over there and do the muffins on the side, and then you're going to bake those, and then you'll bring them back in, and you'll put it out on the storefront. It's something like that, but the whole chain moving forward. These secret contracts are going to be able to allow people to, shall we say, buy and sell more anonymously. There's going to be moving forward. Enigma as well. So we're starting to see giant leaps in the usage of smart contracts. They're putting it out into such an easy format now that instead of having to actually program Solidity to set up a smart contract on a buy-sell transaction, It's going to be more of a form fill in where they'll actually ask you to put the parameters in where then you can add another field if you want to. And then as you fill in the fields, like let's say wheat, okay, it'll ask you what is the commodity that you wish to trade, and then you'll put in wheat. But then behind there, it'll be programmed in for you so you don't actually have to program yourself. But it's nice to know so you can back check after you get the contract set that if you're reading the program correctly, that everything in the parameters and the execution fields are good. But they're bringing it down into use of ease where everybody can use it. Because I don't know a lot of people that can program Solidity. You know, I have my basic skills in that, but still I have to ask people all the time for help. When they can bring it into just a form fill-in and then two parties can trade on that, that's the direction it's moving. So by 2020, it's going to be very apparent that the introduction of cryptocurrency, the crop losses, they're all starting to weave together at that point. And if you're to listen to this radio program in 2020, you'll go, damn, how did that guy even understand that how those two worlds are going to mesh together? It's all about the money. Follow the money. What would you do if you knew the global economy was going to contract because of the food prices? What would you do?
This video is brought to you by our friends at TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds for any grow zone on our planet.